Welcome to Midseason, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a week of Midseason. It's actually been about 9 days. I try to delay my stat reading until we have a little bit of a larger sample size. And what we're going to start with is looking at the updated stats, but then kind of contrast them by going back and looking at the transitions from what happened from before midseason to after midseason, giving some expectations of kind of what we would like to see, what we're expecting to see based off the patch notes, because I think there's going to be some pretty clear expectations of what we're going to see. And then, go from there. But first thing I want to talk about really quick here, I want to talk briefly about ban rates. And I'm going to be perfectly honest, guys. I am speaking partly from ignorance here on ban rates, because that has definitely been a point of contention where the Twitter, the pro community is like, hey, win rates aren't everything. This character is getting banned literally every game. It does that not tell you that the character is broken? So let's kind of take like a quick surface level looking at that, and I'm open to criticism here. So my read of this is shockingly nuanced. First off is that obviously ban rates are often more correlated with people disliking playing versus the character historically for all ranks. And then as you get to the higher ranks, because people in higher ranks are smarter, that's why they're higher ranked, the bans become a lot more targeted towards map choices, which is important, but also targeted towards the OP characters of that rank, right? A great example was like how Sombra bans fell off a lot towards higher ranks. They're still there a lot in higher ranks, but less so, especially back in the day, because Sombra was universally hated in high ranks, but people in high ranks were more willing to avoid gambling on the enemy team having a Sombra player and more on gambling on banning a Widow on Circuit Royale, or banning D.Va as of recently, or banning Ramattra on a toxic brawl map if you're a Rhine player. You get what I'm saying? So as you get to the higher ranks, the ban rates start to affect. Now, the reason why I'm bringing that up is I do think that ban rates should guide hero design decisions, but they shouldn't always dictate balanced decisions. And I kind of just elaborated on why. Because the vast majority of the player base does decide based off of vibes, whether they like or don't like. And even in the higher ranks are also vulnerable to this as well. The obvious low-hanging fruit for this one is Freya, who continue to see high ban rates and probably still sees relatively high ban rates right now for an entire season and a half, despite being gutter tier. And she was still permabanned in high ranks because there was the PTSD of Freya's way overperforming in higher ranks. I don't want to play versus Freya no matter how trash she is, right? And so that proves at least there is an instance of higher ranks being a little bit more vibes focused because they just hate playing versus the character. And also there's even vibe-based stuff where like Kiriko is getting banned a lot, even though she's really bad. And then the flip side of not just people banning a character, but people playing the character. I mean, we exposed, high rank statistics when it came to like, let's say, I mean, we could look at this right now, like even this season. Maybe we'll do this one here. Okay. Like let's look at Grandmaster win rate. And you're going to see something funny here where Kiriko's in the dumpster win rate wise and has a 45.7% pick rate in America. This is stupid. This is a real red flag. This is GM. And so not just from the ban rate, but even the pick rate of certain characters is clearly not competitive. Like if we really wanted to look at win rate here, why is Ediari not played as much season 20? Now, this is before midseason. Right? Now, does that mean that you should play Ediari in every map? No, but a 5.5% pick rate, I promise you that this character should have been picked more often. Promise you.
Doesn't win rate also sometimes misrepresent heroes?
Yeah.
Who have had sharp drops?
Promise you that this character is undervalued or was undervalued. Promise you Baptiste was undervalued situationally, right? You kind of get what I'm saying? And we saw this we also saw this with damage. There's a very obvious hero in this, right? You ready for this one? Grandmaster, look at Cassidy's pick rate. 18% pick rate with 45.6 win rate. And basically what this means is that this character is way overvalued by the highest level. And so what we should see is in the higher ranks, characters have pick rates and win rates that are a little bit more proportional, but basically the higher ranks still have poor biases that misrepresent the strength of certain characters, and so on. So basically my point being is that like ban rates in higher ranks should matter more for balance decisions than ban rates for lower ranks. I think that's a pretty obvious statement. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. And we're going to delve in. But it doesn't mean necessarily that a highly banned character is overtuned at the highest rank, or a highly picked character at the highest rank is overtuned. Do you understand? You bear with me? Bear with me. Okay. Now, the one detail that's important here, and this is where I'm going to be a little bit stepping outside of my wheelhouse. I'm open to feedback here. Okay? Cass is often picked just to counterpick. True, but also higher ranks should be more intelligent with counterpicking, right? Right? You understand what I'm saying? Like, we should trust them to also counterpick more appropriately as well. This is why Bastion has a much higher win rate on paper in higher ranks, because people... Where is Bastion? Is there just no Bastion here? Oh, there he is. Why is he down at the bottom? Okay, there you go. Is because people in higher ranks pick Bastion more appropriately, and he is a low rank crutch. But yeah, long story short, the exception here, and like I said, I'm going to be open to more feedback here, is that in theory, high ban rates for a character at high ranks might drive the character's win rate down. I don't know this for sure, but now you could argue that high ban rates mean that people get less familiar about playing versus the character, so that when they slip through, they're often played by a specialist, or people are just not used to playing versus them.
Guy who ought to know. I used to laugh.
So there's some nuance here. I'm honestly not really sure where I sit in the fence here. So you see people slip through with the character on, but the other thing to consider, let me give you guys an example. When and where is Widow going to get banned? This is just one example. Obvious answer, right? Obvious answer. Okay? However, when Widow is banned on all of her good maps, 60% of the time, and high ranks, which is going to happen more often in higher ranks, okay? What does that do to her win rate and people's impression of the character's strength? Right? Well, let's look. Yeah, exactly. 46.2. And yet I would argue that this is probably Widow's, not only her strongest meta in a long time, but also her strongest strength in probably about a year. So the question is Widow really that bad, or is just the map-dependent character getting slammed in the butt cheeks anytime that she would be the optimal pick? I can't check her win rate in Circuit on this, so I can't. But we will. We can on the live. I don't want to go to the live one just yet. Do you see what I'm saying? You kind of see. So like, this is like an important question. So there's like two ways of looking at this. It's like, do characters that are map specific, like, to be honest with you, Diva, right? If we go to like Diva's win rate, right, in Grandmaster, you know, is Diva better than this because she gets banned often in high ranks, and then people let her slip on brawl maps where she's just gonna be playing versus Sigma or Zarya? I don't know. So my point being is, I am going to admit some ignorance here. I don't know. I honestly don't know. What I would argue is that if you look at high ban rates, especially ban rates that are correlated with certain maps, that should tank the character's win rate. It should be. It should. But who picks Widows and bad maps in Jamie anyways? You raise a good point, but like we're saying, like the difference between swapping to Widow on, you know, Eichenwald versus Circuit Royale. Like, I think Circuit's probably going to be better. That's a good point. But my point being is that, like, okay, maybe this is the takeaway, okay? For all the backseat gamers here, and I know I'm one of them, the concept of that, like, just because a character has a high ban rate should immediately tell you that the character needs immediate balance adjustments is really ignorant. It just is. It's just ignorant. It might, there's a grain of truth in there somewhere, as we've established, that maybe the characters with high ban rates have their win rate tanked a little bit, maybe. But as we've already established, what happens when that character sneaks out of a ban rate and people don't know how to play versus them? You know? So it's not so easy. It's not so easy. My point being is like, I really like try to make sure that when we have these discussions, that unless I have a really good reason to be toxic, I really don't think that this kind of stuff is always super easy. Let me move my camera back down again. I do think it's a little bit more complicated than people give it credit for. And this is also not even factoring the fact that we're looking at things from a grandmaster. If we look at things from all tiers perspective, as we've already clarified, ban rate has very little correlation, or let's put it this way, a weaker correlation with characters actually being strong. It just because any plat player will tell you it's a complete coin flip. Like, you got Roadhog bans, you got Orisa bans, you got Bastion bans, which is okay for sure. But then you got Kiriko bans, you got Mercy bans. It's crazy. I the other day I was in a game. What was the ban? There was something really silly. Like, something really silly. I saw a Bastion player banning Winston on a bad Winston map. I'm not joking. Like, I'm literally not joking. Like, people just, it's just a complete coin flip, right? A lot of the more visual characters get banned more often. So there's another bias in there, right? Like, characters like Doomfist and Wrecking Ball, whether they're strong or not, they're visual. People don't like them. Tor banning Ball, Malga ban on Jib. It's just random crap, right? So, like, people like to weaponize ban rates as if that's like the easiest thing. Here's my opinion, and I think this is as close to objective as you can, certainly worth considering, is that ban rates need to be correlated more with characters that people need to be looking at from a kit design perspective, not balance, right? The obvious answer to this is Sombra, right? But then, and I'm not even necessarily saying that if a character gets banned a lot, that character needs to be reworked necessarily, but it does more often than not deserve an analysis. Like, for example, Zarya. Why do people hate playing versus Zarya? Well, because Zarya exists on a choke and shoots 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 and shoots. There's not a lot of interaction with the character. There's not a lot of nuance with the character. There's not a lot of outplay potential with the character. And she's annoying. Yeah, sure. You can avoid her, sure, but that's not, like, that's rarely a solution that you want to provide. It's just run away from them. I'm kind of, but not a lot of fun. That's not a lot of fun. D.Va's another one, right? People in high ranks ban D.Va. You want to know why? Because Matrix is boring in high ranks. D.Va's strong in high ranks for sure, but it's just boring. Like, it's just boring. You know, Doomfist, right? A lot of the AoE value that he provides can be very frustrating for lowering players. People don't like Sombra. People don't like Mercy. People don't like a lot of characters, right? So, like, people's tastes should be used as questions raised about, is there something that we can change about this character to not take away their identity, to not make them less fun to play, but to make them less frustrating to play into. And this is not a hot take. This is not a hot take. And you should consider these things when we're doing design decisions. And so this kind of goes to my second point here, which is just going to be a really, really, really quick point here. Where are the reworks? Where are the minor reworks? We've had some decent patch notes that have been minor reworks, which is why I've actually been more positive about the patch notes than I think a lot of other people have been, despite some of the balance choices. But there's been really no attempt since, what was our last thing? Was it Farah Ball, right? Maybe Wrecking Ball back in 2023, early 2023, to do anything different to any of the characters. You know, that we just haven't had any attempts at all. Hog was for a long time ago. And that's been basically completely reverted. So I agree that you can't really fix all of the worst designed characters, but I've already proven that this concept that you can't improve their identity, make them more fun to play as and play into, I think we've already proven, again, that wrong with our innumerable rework concepts. We've done 5-minute fix projects. We've done more in-depth rework projects. We've talked about perks more. We've done this for all of this, and I've done it over and over and over again. These characters are salvageable as being playable and more interesting than they are right now. Absolutely. The only exception to that rule has been characters like Roadhog Widow, which I still think they could make improvements with. It's just a lot harder. But they just are. And, like, you can't tell me this brilliant design team, development team that have given us a lot of really great characters couldn't do that. Because a lot of the reworks that we already have been largely positive. So that's kind of point number one. It's like, where have been the reworks? Where have these resources gone? That we had numerous minor and major reworks in the first couple of years of Overwatch 2 and have dried up. Completely disappeared. And that's kind of been my main criticism. So kind of unrelated to the mid-season analysis, but I do think that it is correlated with a lot of people's complaints about ban rates and why I think so much of the criticism online has been so incredibly misguided and wasted. completely missing the point of what the real issues are. Now, there are some obvious low-hanging fruit, but yeah. It's hilarious to me, and like I'll say this. I already said this for the last one, but I'll say it really quickly here. It was hilarious to me. It exactly pinpoints my problem that Zarya Diva, who were objectively worse than Sigma at the highest ranks, that GM champion, were complained about from a balanced perspective by the vocal Twitter community. And Sigma was complained about less, despite being significantly stronger at the highest ranks. I wonder why. Well, because Sigma, weirdly, is probably a little bit better designed and has a little bit more counterplay potential. Now, I know a lot of people hate Sigma, and I think he's absolutely overtuned, but I saw more negative discourse about Zarya Diva, who are weaker than Sigma, because I think more people enjoy counterplaying and outplaying Sigma than they do Zarya Diva. Or maybe he's less in their face. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, no, hang a second. Why aren't we complaining about the objectively higher performing tank and high ranks with like a 57% whatever win rate, or 58, 59 when he was, before he got hotfixed? And they're complaining about Zarya Diva. Because guess what? High ranked players don't like the gameplay loop of playing versus Zarya Diva as much as they do versus Sigma on a lot of maps. You know what I'm saying? So, wow. Are we not like processing this? Why do we? Yeah, so I'm not going to beat it at a horse, but this is exactly my point. This is exactly my point. He had 60% in gym, yeah. So, yeah, this is why we have to consider these things, because this is where a lot of our analysis comes from, you know? So, okay, let's kind of jump through here. I mean, let's look at the patch notes here. I don't think we'll need Overwatch ticks anymore. Doomfist got a slap on the wrist, but quality of life stuff, we talked about it. Diva got a slap on the wrist more for high rank. I won't analyze things too much, but I'm just kind of refreshing what changed. Ashe got a minor nerf. Bastion, minor nerf. Freya, minor buff. Well, depends. Genji, minor buff. Symmetra, minor nerf. Vendetta, mid nerf. I hated the design of the nerf, but we're not going to beat that. I already talked about that in my last video. Venture, slap on the wrist. Idiari, pretty significant buff with breakpoints. Lucio, minor nerf. Moira, minor buff. Zenyatta, medium buff from a character that was already performing relatively well. So from a balance perspective, let's just, I guess, kind of look at it from a role to role here. You know, we are expecting, I mean, it's kind of, you got to see the spoilers here just a little bit here. Let me close this down. We're expecting Diva to be a little bit worse. We're expecting Doomfist to be a little bit worse as well, but a lot of this is also context dependent as well. So like if certain characters do better than others, that will contextually also, is he being naughty?
Has anyone ever really been far even as decided to use even go to do look more like?
Oh my gosh, thank you for the 1,000 bits. Has anyone ever really been far even as decided to use even go want to do look more like? No, it's never happened. I think the part of the problem has been the context of what has been happening. So when you switch things up from the contextual perspective, from an outsider's perspective, you get this inside look about the context of like the way that the numbers are moving up and down. And so from like a macro, micro perspective, you know, you're min-maxing, but really you're not really pushing the needle any further than you were before. So I think in a management position, you have to kind of analyze the situation, decide what's our best path moving forward. You know, you've been contributing a lot to the team, but I think our people skills just have been kind of incompatible. And so we really have to reconsider the way that we've been evaluating processes. Okay. Yeah, Diva's going to be a little bit worse. I mean, we imagine with, you know, Zen, Poke's strong. Zen got, like, you got to think of like the movers and shakers, right? Which was Zen's untouched, Zen's buffed, Sig's untouched, Zen's buffed, Tracer's untouched, Vendetta's a little bit nerfed, right? So you're thinking about like, I mean, I'm not smart enough to read the tea leaves here with everything, but we could probably guess that shooty heroes equal goody, and divey heroes and brawly wally heroes not so good. Like that's kind of like my take. You get what I'm saying? Yeah, we'll touch base on this again next meeting. Yeah, so like you might even see characters that were untouched do better, or characters that were untouched do worse. So we'll take a look here. So we're gonna start with all tiers. Obviously, a little bit of an American bias here. We'll probably bounce around to Asia as well, and highest tiers as well. So we generally go all tiers, Grandmaster, all tiers, Grandmaster, and American, Asia. So Yeah, let's take a look here. Sigma, obviously, like, still really strong. Like, no surprise there. Queen doing surprisingly well, which is a bit of a surprise to me, but she's been fine for some time. Maybe some of the competition's kind of been cleared out, but yeah, there's nothing really has shifted within the tank meta. Unsurprisingly, characters that were good before are relatively good now. Nothing has really changed. The only interesting change is whether the Discord buffs and Zenyatta's pick rate, which I imagine has to have gone up, has affected things here. And you'd expect it to affect things like map situational. Reinhardt doesn't seem to have as much. Hazard definitely not as good here. Ram, obviously, Malga, Roadhog, Orisa. These are characters that if the map is not great for them, Discord just annihilates them. So I would guess that these characters near the bottom are probably struggling even more so. Orisa is a great example of a character that yeah. And if we look quickly at Grandmaster Champion, kind of more of the same, really. I mean, Diva's definitely taking a bit of a hit. I mean, she's taking a big hit, right? And this is kind of like why I was a little bit more positive about, like, obviously the Zen meta's probably not helped her too much, although I don't think her matchup is that bad. But like the booster boot breakpoint, I think is definitely enough to move this a percentage point or so. So, at least in America. It's 56 in EU GM. I mean, that's crazy to me. That's shocking. What about Asia? I know we're jumping around here. Still competitive. Okay. So maybe Americans just suck. But it is a smaller sample size. So, Orisa doing a little bit better, and GM is interesting. Malga doing a little bit worse, not a surprise. Doomfist doing a little bit worse, not a surprise. But yeah, EU definitely loves its Diva. Diva's just a very strange hero because she's just not really... She definitely exists in that, like, that gray area, you know? Where she's not the best brawl hero, but she can. And she's not the best dive, but she can. So, I don't know. It's a bit of a mess. We'll move on. Let's look at Asia really fast. And then we'll look at all in a second. Sigma, Zarya, Diva, Junker Queen. Winston being this bad is a little concerning for Asia, who's usually pretty good with the character. Asia's super weird with the niche picks. They always either throw or troll. I barely ever look at Asia as a region for the bottom tier because it tells you very little. And then Sigma's still, ridiculous. I don't know, like tank just hasn't been super insightful for me for a while. Like it's pretty predictable. These tanks are going to be in the bottom. That's basically it. The only really interesting thing is like how much is Sigma overperforming, and is Zarya or Diva, how badly are they overperforming in high ranks, if at all? Won't have Asia inflated win rates at the top of the bottoms are intentionally thrown? Yes. 100%. Right. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So, GG's. No change at all. Really. Not a significant one because any conclusions that we could have drawn too soon on the Diva change, which is a good example of where you can't really read too much in this immediately, is just like, well, we don't know. And I really don't think you can necessarily decide whether a region is bad or not. I think that's like, I really don't think you could do that. You can do that for like pro play for sure, but you can't do that for ranked. You just can't do that for ranked. It would be almost impossible to like decide on where that is. And I think the sample size is so freaking incredibly large that like it's so incredibly difficult to know. The more important thing is like the bias that regions have. Like, okay, so cultural bias here, right? Like EU loves its Pharah, EU loves its weird counter dive, whatever stuff. EU dive, not as good. Asia is the opposite. Asia loves dive. Asia also has a throwing problem where they will throw if they have anti-meta characters on their team all the time. Much higher frequency, whereas America, Europe are way more like non-off meta friendly. And then even just the context of like players that like want to grind characters so they perform mechanically better in those characters. It's different in region to region. Okay, let's keep going. We will not be looking at console. I know that question is going to get asked. We won't be looking at console. No hatred, just expediency, priority. Okay. Vendetta's dropped by what? 1.5% in America? Something like that? At least a percentage point. Which is good, I guess, but overhead things. I'm not going to go over my same points in Vendetta. Like I said, the actual mid-season patch react, I talk about my problems with the nerfs that they did. I think that they were bad nerfs, but she definitely needed a nerf, and she definitely needs more nerfs. So, yes. It's also kind of worth highlighting as well that a lot of Well, okay, no, I won't say that. I think it's fine. And the Genji buff is done okay. Like Genji being here is like cool for me. I think it's a little high for sure. Like ammo buff and him skyrocketing here is crazy, but sure, fine. Now the problem here, which is what we wanted to talk about, was we'll look at it in a second. But what's he doing in Grandmaster? Does the ammo buff help him in Grandmaster? Because that's where Genji was bad. Genji was not bad prior to the recent buff. He was not. He was only bad in higher ranks. Let's cheat. Houston. Bueller. Shirley. Oh dear. Sir. Oh no. Yeah, so this is the problem, right? Ammo buff, yay! But sucks in GM. Sucks in GM. Poop. And this is what they needed to change. Like Genji has never really been a bad lower mid-rank character. Shocking, right? But he's just really struggled to perform in higher ranks, and that is wrong. He should, like Tracer, scale up a little bit at higher ranks, because not only is he more fun to play, or more fun to watch rather at the pro level and ranked level. Like people like watching Genji streamers for a reason, but also he's on paper has that higher skill ceiling that should be rewarded more. And right now it's just not the case. So, we could talk about that endlessly. I would start with the flat cooldown, and so on. But yeah, problems. Was the projectile so? Yeah, it was. But I don't think necessarily that was a bad nerf. The problem is that it needed to be compensated. That would be something that would be a little bit better to exploit at higher ranks. So now obviously it's contextual, right? Like it also depends on the meta as well. So we'll keep going. Ashe, I think a little bit weaker. I don't remember, but obviously still performing well. Farah, Venture, whatever. Sim has dropped, which is fine. A little bit. Torb, Hanzo. This is Bastion actually pretty noticeably worse. But I will say that Bastion's win rate actually wasn't really that great even prior to the nerf. I think he was like above average, because lower ranks still have no idea how to play Bastion. And he has a counter swap problem that this chronically deflates his win rate. Tracer's trash, Cassie's still trash, shocker. Let's look at Grandmaster, and then we'll do some regional move arounds. Symmetra is still fine, but it's way, way too small of a sample size. Pick rate 3.9. And Grandmaster Champion, we just cannot pull any conclusions about this really at all. Vendetta ban rate, obviously, is really hurting this as well. So it's really hard to know how good she is right now as well. Basically, it's just very difficult to read these numbers at Grandmaster Champion, because it's easier. It's still difficult and for an all tiers, right? Like this is still hard, but at least it's all tiers, 5% of 100% of a player base, right? This is 3.9% of 1.2% of a player base, right? Like we're talking about like fractions, like we're talking about like one player having a 65-7% win rate can have a actual visible impact on this win rate. So we really can't pull too many conclusions. And this is also regional too, so just to narrow it down further. But Ashe TLDR obviously still fine. We'll look at a couple of these. Bastion obviously is still fine, maybe a bit weaker. Tracer, I won't say is on the up and up by any means, but too small of a sample size to know for sure. But we will see how this plays out. Still ridiculously low for the role and the rank. And hilariously, high rank players continue to beat their heads against the wall with hitscan. But that is not a surprise. So yeah, that Vendetta pick rate is low. She is getting banned all the time. 100%. We'll do some regional sniffing here. Nothing super crazy to note here. As always, like those weird off meta stuff feels a bit better. We'll quickly look here, see if there's any crazy outliers. Yeah, Vendetta's definitely a bit weaker. Genji's a bit stronger. Symmetra's a bit weaker as well. No crazy surprises across the board here. I mean, yeah, I guess even the Symmetra is still tolerable. Again, very small pick rate within Grandmaster Champion. We won't read too much into it. Ashe still good. Vendetta's pick rate's crazy. 5.9% pick rate in Asia. That ban rate's insane. Tracer, looking better in Asia, in Grandmaster. Not a huge surprise there, but like for context, Tracer is almost always like 1 or 2 in Asia. So prior, but yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's we will jump and get back to America here. There's just been 0 surprises. I mean, we already know what's going to happen here, guys. We know what's going to happen. This one was by far like probably the most impactful changes, where the Edari and the Zenyatta nerf in terms of visible meta. So those characters, Edari had a very low pick rate, but was performing really well. So that her Giga buff was a bit of a surprise. And then the Zenyatta Discord buff was the wrong buff on a character that was already performing relatively well. Now, let me go ahead and say here, I have 0 problem with rotating metas. I really do. I don't have a problem with rotating metas. And that's something that they've been very public about purposely going for, is like rotating metas, like heroes in, heroes out. I think that's very clearly why Sigma and Ashe have received the love that they have had. I think they've overtuned specifically Sigma, but probably to, and I don't like some of the changes they've done. Like for Ashe, the buff they gave her, I think was a buff I wouldn't like during an Ashe meta. I like it, but I really don't have a problem with Sig Ashe, and I don't have a problem with Zenyatta being in the meta. I just would have liked a buff that would have also done work for his long-term growth. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, this is where we talked about on the patch, but like, hitbox size, being able to use your abilities during your ultimate, little things like that, that would have absolutely had an impact on his performance, made him meta. I'm telling you, just shrinking Zenyatta's hitbox to match his visual things and allowing him to use Harmony Orb or whatever during trance, 1%, 1.5, 2% pick rate or win rate. I'm telling you, it's a big deal. Instead, we got the Discord buff, which is not great. Not great. So we're going to see Zenyatta or EDR at the top.
Actually,
I almost guarantee it.
Honestly, I think people just feel like the juice isn't worth the
maybe.
squeeze,
Could be. Yeah, it could be.
Etc. running around.
And so we're going to see EDR Zenyatta at the top. I'm curious to see how far Lucio has fallen. Hopefully not too far. I think the nerf that they gave was pretty reasonable. 5-second cooldown on Boop is fine. But yeah, we'll see. Isn't better to have a healthy meta always in the format is fine? It's just really hard to have, like, who decides what a healthy meta is, right? I think I do think novelty matters, even if people complain. I honestly do. I think people don't always know what they want. And I think variety matters. I really do. Now, I agree with you that, let me put it this way. My opinion is that Tracer should always be in the top 5 for win rates and Grandmaster Champion. Always. No exceptions. In the current state of the damage roll right now.
I honestly have a theory that Vendetta's win rate is actually an artifact of her pick rate dropping 6-fold after nerfs and how
could be people are better situationally at picking her. But yeah, I think Tracer and GM Champion, given the context of the competition's skill ceiling and so on, should always be top 5. But she shouldn't always be number 1 or number 2 or number 3. I think Winston and GM Champion should never drop out of top 5 or 6. Never. But I don't think he should always be number 1 or number 2 or number 3. Does that make sense? I don't think Lucio should never drop out of top 3 or 4 in support. I would say Lucio top 3 or 4 because I think the support cast is way, way more cancer. But I don't think he should always be number 1. So I think there needs to be some fluctuations in there. I 100% agree. I would never want to see a current iteration of an Orisa, Roadhog, certain, I think there's a blacklist, right? But I don't mind Sigma being the strongest tank right now. I really don't. I've kind of said I would prefer a 53% win rate Sigma, than a 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60. But I don't mind Sigma being the strongest tank. Fine with me. Let it go for a month. I don't care. Sure. It's okay with me. There's a line between a character being too strong, which I think Vendetta's clearly crossed, and I've been kind of critical of that. I think it's just absurd to have a character, even a new character, be 55, 56, 57, whatever win rate for as long as she has. And I do think that there is certain characters that should never break the top 5 in their current state. But I don't think I think there's some nuance. So, do I think Bastion's on that blacklist? Maybe. I would never say Bastion should be in the top 5. But Bastion in his current state has earned to be in the top 10. Maybe that's a hot take. But I don't think Bastion's near as annoying to play as he used to be. He's a lot higher skill ceiling than he used to be. And even as somebody that plays a decent amount of tank, I don't hate playing Bastion as much as I used to. You know? I still would say that Bastion was overtuned, sure. Yeah, and I've talked about exactly what I think they should have changed about him, but it's gotten better. Like, that's to me is like, that's kind of my rework argument earlier. It's like, oh, you can't fix Bastion. I guarantee you, there were people back in Overwatch 1 that said you could not fix and improve Bastion, you destroy his identity. And right now, maybe those people really do think that they destroyed Bastion's identity, but I legitimately not only enjoy playing Bastion, but I don't hate playing versus Bastion near as much as I used to. Is it perfect? No. But I think like that's just one example of at least a dozen, proving that people that think that you can't improve hero identities, completely false. It's subjective, of course, but I just think that whole concept is just utter nonsense. Utter nonsense. So, and that's just one example. Character that isn't even quote-unquote perfectly designed. He's gotten a lot better. If they never changed anything about Bastion right now, I would still be happy with his state. I wish that you can always do more. You know me, it's like always pushing for more interesting, more. Maybe you can go too far. But I think like, yeah, okay, good job. It was a success, you know? Okay, let's go ahead and move into support here. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Good news, Brig looks to be in an okay spot. Low pick rate, but yeah, it's fine. Exactly where we want her. Juno's fine. Lucio's actually doing okay, which is that's good as well. Ana's just, they just need to buff Ana, I think. Yeah. I just think this is too high. Even for a Zen quote-unquote meta. It's just too high. I mean, EDRA's pick rate has what, doubled? Doubled, I think. That's a little concerning for a character that, based off of her popularity and her design, I know I'm going to make people angry saying this, but I'm going to say it. I think that she should remain unpopular. I don't think that she's very healthy during the meta, nor is she particularly interesting or fun to play for most people. And the reason why I know that is because that people don't pick her or play her when she's good. She has to be broken for people to play or pick her. Now, that's not a perfect metric. A great example is like, then is Wrecking Ball boring? No, he's just too hard. There's different metrics for popularity for sure. You know, I think a lot of people pick Moira, despite her being, I think, kind of boring. So it's not a perfect metric. I understand there's flaws in that logic for sure. But from my subjective point of view, I don't think EDR metas are very good. I think there's way more interesting poke-oriented supports with more interesting kits and counterplay. BAP, Ana, Zen I have criticisms of, you know, so. So yeah, EDR is insane. Breakpoints are way too strong. Zenyatta is also way too strong. But other than that, Ana's too low, and then, you know, Kiriko is just comically low, as usual. Yeah. Let's take a look at Grandmaster. I actually kind of expect Grandmaster to be very similar. I don't actually expect Grandmaster to be that much different. Whoa, Zen is way lower than expected. Even in Grandmaster, this is lower than Zenyatta. Maybe smaller of a pick rate. Maybe he's getting banned a lot. I actually don't know. Does anybody watch a lot of streamers? Is Zenyatta getting banned frequently? This is much lower than I expect. I'd expect at least 51% here. I'd expect Zenyatta to be up here. I'm expecting ban rates. Now, I understand, but he still gets poop over on higher ranks. Even in Grandmaster Champion, I'm not sure that that's true. And scrims, meta, official, pro, yeah, 100%, yeah. Interesting. Okay, so maybe this is just this is why you can't buff Discord alone, because for all the plat tanks that are just going to stand there, that hurts like butt. But anybody that LOS's Discord or angles around him, this doesn't address a lot of his root issues in higher ranks.
But it may also be that
so
Discord being busted doesn't
we're not back-splaining this. This is always the case. But even despite that, I was expecting it to be higher. But wow, this is even more damning than I thought. This is even more damning than I thought. I thought that, okay, maybe the Zen is going to still be okay. But yeah, let's look at some other regions before we draw two great major conclusions here. And maybe just characters like EDR, they kind of are competitive with Zenyatta's niche, and she's just better than Zenyatta in most of the situations. Different, but better. But yeah, I mean, 30% Discord is definitely a noob stomper buff. Let's put it that way. Definitely a noob stomper buff, which is why we don't like it, right? It's why we don't like it. Let's move ahead to Europe. Let's jump around in GM for just a second. Yeah, see, this is more of what I was expecting. I don't know. This is why I guess we don't pull conclusions too fast. Kiriko 45.8 and Grandmaster. She's not broken. Only remember, guys, the plat players are dragging Kiriko's win rate down. Remember that? Remember all the pro players that plat players that don't know how to take angles are dragging the win rate down? Love that. 47.5 and Asia. Yeah, I mean, Zen's actually was fine in Europe. EDRA wearing on a dominating here. So, yeah. Nothing super crazy here. I'm glad to see Lucio still performing well in regions that are relevant to him, aka not Asia. He's doing okay. He's doing okay. A little worse than I would have liked, though. But I think that's more to do with the competition here. So, I don't like EDRA meta. I think it sucks, but could be worse. Could be worse. She's too hard for Grandmasters. All the GM low bobs. Right. Thank you. No rush. I appreciate that. Keep shifting those goalposts. Sarah Lee's putting on a masterclass of the pro player mindset. Not the pro player mindset, the high rank player mindset. Yeah, that's true, Matt. Yeah, that's true. Okay, let's sniff around here. Let's do a little sniffing. I mean, yeah, again, it's shocking. EDR is Zenyatta dominating 54%. I think it's just too high, not to mention the buffs of the Discord specifically. I'm a little bit less critical of EDR's buffs. To me, there's just a lot less that you can buff with EDR, at least off the top of my head. Maybe you could do like Outburst Verticality, or to me, it's more of a design problem with the character. With Zenyatta, I do think there's design space that they could have done. They just haven't. So I'm more critical. I'm more critical of EDR's design and more critical of the balance that they did to Zenyatta, the change they did, if that makes sense. So, yeah. Asia. Oh my gosh. 56.8 at all tiers. This might be the matchup versus like crappy dive players in Asia is insane. Like, for example, EDRA is like I don't know if this is accurate. This is just my guess, just an educated guess. Is that like Asia's super dive filled, right? EDRA is like a great example of an anti-dive character if you're bad. But if you have any sort of high level staging, high patience, she doesn't really have the ability to get away from it. Pylon's just broken versus like, it's like a skill check, right? Unless she's wildly overtuned. So what you have is then you go like, okay, all these Asia players forcing these crappy dive comps, forcing Tracer, forcing Genji, Pylon, I mean, this is insane. This is just insane. So it's weirdly enough, it might be the higher dive pick rates from not strong dive heroes that are inflating her win rates. But regardless, like contextually, this is nutso. Like absolutely nutso. Would 1 second minus sleep dart cooldown on that? I'd rather they did something with Nade, but yeah. So she's definitely overtuned, and then you just inflate that by maybe a context of crappy dive characters. Like, for example, my point being is like if they buff Tracer, this would drop. I'm fairly confident. But I mean, come on. I'm sorry, 57% pick rate in all tiers is crazy. Crazy. That's crazy talk. That's insane. That's insane. That like, is that the strongest win rate of any character right now at all tiers? 56.8. Yeah, that's by far the strongest, by over a percentage point, the strongest character. That's crazy. That's insane. Wild. Yeah, that's even stronger than I thought. Even stronger than I thought. So no major surprises today. Maybe the Diva conundrum is definitely something that we have to kind of wait and see on. Probably just need a larger sample size before we draw any conclusions from that. So this is why I definitely focus on all tiers, especially only a week and a half after the initial thing, because I think Grandmaster champions disproportionately benefit from more time. Like, for example, I think Tracer's win rate got, like, I think when we did this, like, a month and a half ago, I think Tracer's win rate dropped by, like, 2 whole percentage points from when we first analyzed it to the end of the season. So what I will say is take a I won't say a grain of salt. I'll say like a chunk of salt with anything that we're looking at with Grandmaster Champion at all regions. But I think all tiers we have a little more confidence in, which is why we look at all tiers, because there's just a much larger sample size. So, yeah. Yep. Okay. EDR needs nerfs. She's going to have her time to shine. But I think this is kind of my criticism here is I know it's a fine tuning thing, but like, I just think anything larger than this is probably too strong for a meta. Because you go from meta defining characters to meta dependent characters, as in like you're kind of, especially in high ranks, depending on those characters to be picked to perform. It's an arbitrary line in the sand for me, and I don't think anybody should go by my guidelines exclusively, but it is definitely something that is it's eyebrow raising. And certainly 55% or 56 or 56.8 should be probably a line that we should try to avoid crossing for any reason, for any period of time. So. But yeah, I agree. If we're going to nerf EDR, I think it kind of comes down to kit stuff as well. So like not just reverting the change and we're right back where we started. So. Brigida's a little bit more meta dependent. She's also a bit more of a misunderstood character, like Kiriko-ish, who chronically has deflated pick rates or win rates, I think. And she also has a relatively higher skill ceiling. So I'm not as concerned about Brig. I think Brig is so fine. And like we said, we've talked about Brig in terms of like bug fixes, quality of life stuff, more so than anything else. In my opinion, I think the sequence of patches makes it hard to argue that devs don't intentionally push meta. I don't think anybody is arguing that devs don't push meta. I think anybody that thinks that the devs don't try to create little metas, I don't think they manually control every hero, but it's obvious. It's objectively true. I mean, they've even said it. I don't remember where, but I swear Alec at one point on stream was talking about like they want to cycle through characters. Clearly push metas. And as I've already said, I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think it's more to do with like how it's being done in terms of the quality of the types of buffs and nerfs that they're doing, like what buffs and nerfs, which have been some good, some bad, and then how big those buffs or nerfs have been, like the how powerful those changes have been made. Like for example, Zenyatta, a great example. Zenyatta getting a little micro buff is not bad, but I think he was already strong enough to where he shouldn't have gotten anything major because he was already a good performing support if I remember correctly. Hello. 52.7 prior to the buff. So something minor, very minor, and it needs to be something that makes the character more interesting and better and more, as we've seen, better in higher ranks preferably, and not just a Discord buff. So it was how big the buff was too big, and also the type of buff was wrong. But giving Zenyatta a minor buff was not a problem. Letting Zen have a little bit more time to shine, going from 10.6, where are we at, to a little bit more common. That's okay. Sorry. I think long term, agreed. So that's kind of my point. It's why I was critical of the Reinhardt Earthshatter nerf that they gave, right? Because I think Ryan actually needed a nerf for sure, but he needed to not affect his high rank win rate as much. And also something that just makes the character more interesting. Like just nerfing his ult charge is just kind of, like nerf his shield by 100 or something, like. That's why I was less critical of the Lucio boop change, because I know that was a fairly significant nerf, but also like I do think a 4-second cooldown boop was just probably too low from a character design perspective. And it's why I was very critical of the Vendetta nerf, despite her absolutely needing a nerf and probably needing more nerfs. So anyway, that's my opinions. Nothing really surprising here. Nothing really to go over the top negative about, because nothing here is a surprise based off of the patch notes. I've already gotten all my negativity out onto the patch notes. And so I guess the good news here is this is about what we expected. No surprise negativities. Oh my gosh, this character's like really the only major surprise was the fact that EDRA is performing a little better than I was expecting. And it is disappointing to see Zenyatta performing as poorly as he is, at least from the small sample size in Jam, although that might change. But nothing really overly negative or overly positive. Pretty much what we expected for the most part. Yeah. And definitely, like I said, the Vendetta nerfs weren't enough, right? Like overhead is still a problem, and her kid is still not as interesting to play as it used to be. So, yeah. Okay. Questions, thoughts, concerns. Otherwise, I'm going to take a quick snack eating break, and then maybe we'll do some React slot for an hour. Got a couple of things we can maybe watch and talk about. But yeah, this, and from like a meta perspective, this meta is really not trash. Like we've had so many worse metas. I mean, Sigma, Queen, Ryan, Doom, like having these characters being not super good is definitely like, we've had worse metas. Vendetta is definitely a little toxic, but people are protecting themselves with bans a lot. We do see Ashe, we see Reaper, we see Rat, Bastion, Soldier. We've had far worse metas, and even though I make fun of EDR, I think the reason why I'm so aggressive against EDR is the fact that I think that she's under-hated by the community because she's just not very visible, where it's really easy to dunk on Moira, Mercy, Kiriko. But yeah, I think that this meta has been like, every meta, anything that's immediately annoying is always worse than anything we've dealt with historically, but I think if you look at it like as objectively as you possibly can, this meta has not been really that bad. So... are we going to get big perk reworks again? No idea. I think, so this is my big question for 2026, okay? And I'm saying this as objectively as I can without knowing all the turns and tables and secrets, is where are the reworks? Where are the perk, are we going to get perk fixes? How much more time are we going to invest into the perk system? Where are the developer resources gone? Where are they going? What I have seen the last 6 months has been underwhelming, but not bad. Let's put it that way. A lot of patches with a lot of nice little changes, a lot of good vision. Give some credit to Custa, I think, who's probably done a lot of these. Some decent changes, but it's like, yeah, that long term. It's like if we have patches like this for 3 years, a lot of things are going to be in a good spot. It's like, I'm not the content. I'm like, where are these resources going right now? And I just don't know, really. Maybe Stadium, new heroes. It's like, I would like to see more quality long-term vision patches changed. Like, for example, if Discord was buffed because they didn't have the time to be able to do an effective hitbox reduction of Zenyatta, if that's even I don't even know if that's on the table or not. Like, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt here from my subjective opinion. But it's also like, man, that would be like it would be nice if you had the resources for that. Now, I know that like I'm the competitive guy, so I'm going to be all the minutia and the nitty gritty. But I mean, hey, I'm going to say it, like that's my opinion and that's why you guys are here. So, but, ignoring balance here, right? I would like to see more of these, like you said, like the perk rework stuffs, and I would love for them to do another, a month or two from now, do another go through all the perks, change a lot of these perks, revert a couple, fix a couple, adjust a couple, evaluate if any perks should be added to base kit, and then compensation nerfs happen. I just feel like there's so much opportunity there, so much opportunity there. Right, we haven't had a lot of map reworks in a while either, and those have overall been very good. I mean, I think the last thing we had was a lot of the Flashpoint changes, which were really good. Yeah. So we'll see. And then I also think like the major criticism, I think, okay, so here's the problem. I think balancing has objectively been really bad recently. Worse than it's been in probably all of 2025. Yes, it has. Patches have been okay. I like the changes. Let me be very clear. So people kind of, I think, confuse the what was changed and how much was changed. Okay, so I liked most of the things that have been happening in the patch notes. And that's why I've been consistently giving them pretty good grades. In terms of like long-term, they have been those many reworks that have been good. A lot. So you can go through all my patch notes reactions and I'll explain why. The problem has been from like a balance standpoint. By balance, I mean how strong or how weak certain characters are. We keep seeing this number, right? Or this number, right? Or Vendetta or Sigma or GM Diva Zarya for a little bit, right? Where these characters were vastly overperforming for a period of time. Now, I know, I don't give a frick about you Orisa Roadhog players. You guys get nothing, right? But it's been kind of top heavy for a while. It has been, I think, objectively a lot more volatile than it has been for most of 2025, at least since we've had public stats. Like, it's been like, wow. Used to be like, I think just even going back to Wu Yang, right? Like, what was Wu Yang? 56, 57%, right? Which are like, that's still pretty bad, right? But first off, he's not as offensive as Vendetta, which is obviously true. But I do think Wu Yang, as OP as he was not quite as bad as Vendetta. And then if you go back to Freya, again, obnoxious, right? For a lot of people, but not quite as bad as Vendetta, at least certainly in most ranks. And certainly stuff like Sigma having 54% whatever win rate for months on end has not been something that we've really had either. So I think it kind of comes down to those people being negative about patch notes, because we are having characters that are clearly overperforming for longer periods of time than they should. And I don't think it's an accident this is correlated also with the holidays. I think that's definitely part of the thing, but yeah. How much control do you have of somebody's win rate, though? Well, see, I think that I understand your point, but this is why we have hotfixes, right? This is why we have hotfixes. And I also think that at a certain point in time, that is a gauge of competence, right? When you slap Vendetta on the wrist with 225 HP breakpoints and call it a day before going on holiday, right? That's a very negative thing to say. Let me reframe that. When you slap Vendetta on the wrist for 225 HP and kind of let it cook for a few weeks and kind of let people get used to it, I just think that's a bad read. I like that they release characters on the safe side of strong. I have no problems with that strategy, but safe side of strong versus 58% win rate, 59%, come on. And I think that the reason why I'm aggressive about this is because I like Vendetta. I like playing Vendetta. I think she's interesting. I think her hero design is overhated. I think she has a lot of problems with her execution. Thank you so much. But I think that she's fine. They're really tarnishing people's opinion of these interesting new characters because the balance has been done so glacially slow and not done very well. So people get really, really negative about these character designs. You guys don't remember this, but people freaking hated Sigma on release for a while. Shocking, right? Double shield. And he was unbelievably overtuned on release. One of the probably top 5 strongest hero designs on release, probably. And so it's taken literally years, like 5, 6 years, for people to get to the point to where they actually like Sigma, tolerate Sigma metas to where we are today. We could say format too, but because they just didn't balance the character quickly enough, so people started to really freaking hate him. People really hate him. And this is my concern, is we have the Freya problem, where people are like, Freya still has a lot of problems. I can agree that there's like audio design problems and breakpoints and bolts. And you could say that you don't like Freya, but I think a lot of people are probably overhate Freya a little bit because she was too strong for too long. And Vendetta has been way too strong for too long. And so a character that I feel like has potential as a design just was balanced too slow for too long, and now she's going to deal with this problem where she's going to be like the black sheep here that everyone's going to hate her because she just was too strong for too long. Malga, right? People still to this day think Malga is like Satan, and Malga definitely is not the best design tank, but Malga does not deserve to be in the same conversation as Ramatra, Orisa, or Roadhog. I would argue that Zarya is an inferior tank to Malga, design-wise. That's my maybe not super hot take, but I think that there is I think Malga is a more interesting tank to play as and against than Zarya by a decent step. And yet that's not a very cold take for the larger part of the community, maybe not for you guys, because people still have PTSD from his release. So it's like, this is the problem when you don't balance properly or fast enough, is that people really develop negative opinions, and then those opinions stick. Yeah, I agree, Matt. Malgamira is a joke. And so that those opinions get real sticky real fast. So that's my problem. Is that people's opinions are very slow to change, And so if you make an egregious error and let it sit for a long time, you tarnish people's opinions. And I think the real danger of that is that you create this. I think Overwatch's hero release, Venture, Juno, Wu Yang, Hazard, to a lesser extent Freya, but I think a lot of those characters have been really fun and really interesting. And a lot of people's opinions of those characters are bad because they've been poorly balanced, not necessarily because they're badly designed. Are they Winston, Genji, Tracer tier, Lucio tier? Well, I mean, you know me. At least you know me, right? But I mean, I think those characters are fun to play. I really do. And I don't mind playing versus them either. The problem has just been a question of balance. And so balance, the problem then is that design can bleed into balance, and balance can bleed into design. An interestingly designed character that is poorly balanced can be interpreted as poorly designed. That's the danger. You know, so if you don't balance correctly, you can make yourself look like a badly designed character. Right, so kind of a bummer. And I think Vendetta is like the most recent casualty. And this kind of raises some concerns about future hero releases as well. To where I want them on the safe side of strong. I want them to be more responsive with balancing. I want them to nerf and buff the right things. This is obvious low-hanging fruit. And then if the new character has a 53% win rate and is not picked every game, so be it. It's all right.